In the chaotic era of the Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao did not search for virtuous men. He needed efficient war machines. He viewed the talent market with practical and ruthless eyes. In his world, the traditional concept of morality was stripped away, leaving only naked utility. While his rivals were obsessed with flashy titles and moral high grounds, Cao Cao silently built an empire based on the darkest corners of human psychology. This is not just a history story. This is the cold-blooded recruitment manual of a wartime CEO. He understood a brutal truth. To operate a giant machine of war, you sometimes have to accept rusty but sharp components, rather than beautiful but useless decorations. Let us look at the market context at that time to see Cao Cao's insane breakthrough. Yang Xiu, his biggest rival in the north, represented the traditional leadership style that favored appearance and lineage. Yang Xiu only recruited people from prestigious families with clean backgrounds. That created a massive barrier to entry. Talented men with low origins or dark pasts were looked down upon by this high society. They had doors slammed in their faces. They became wild wolves cornered by fate, carrying resentment and a burning desire to prove themselves. Cao Cao saw this massive, neglected goldmine of human resources. He realized that hunger and resentment were more powerful fuels than noble birth. He issued the Seek Talent Decree with a revolutionary mindset. Meritocracy above all. Simply put, if you have talent, I do not care who you are. You could be a thief, a person with a questionable past, or someone who violated social norms. As long as you have the strategy to help me win battles, I will roll out the red carpet for you. This was a powerful psychological strike. It hit the desperate need for recognition among social When the world called them trash, Cao called them geniuses. This shift in perception created an invisible bond stronger than any solemn oath. Let us analyze this psychological mechanism deeper. They had burned the bridge back to the hypocritical moral world outside. Cao Cao held the monopoly on their political lives. He created an environment where loyalty did not come from love, but from survival dependency. Employees were forced to dedicate 200% of their energy. Why? Because winning for Cao Cao was the only way to define their own value. Take Guo Jia as a prime example. He was a strategic genius but was known for his hedonism and disregard for social etiquette. Under Yuan Shao, Guo Jia would have been fired for disgracing the organization's image. But Cao Cao tolerated it all. He understood that suppressing a genius's nature could kill their strategic brilliance. Cao Cao accepted the moral risk to exchange for maximum efficiency. He viewed Guo Jia as a high-risk venture capital investment. He accepted the personal baggage to harvest good-tier strategies that determined the fate of the world. This mindset reveals Cao Cao's nature. He did not recruit humans. He recruited functions. When you strip away the moral shell, humans become tools. A sharp knife does not need to be clean. It just needs to be effective enough to strike down the enemy. The pinnacle of this art of managing emotions and interests is best shown through the Zhongzhou incident. Zhongzhou was a bitter enemy. He caused the painful death of Cao Cao's eldest son, his trusted nephew, and his fiercest general, Dian Wei, in the Battle of Wencheng. The pain of losing a child and generals was immense. Normally, a father would crush Zhongzhou for revenge. But when Zhongzhou surrendered a second time, what did Cao Cao do? He threw a lavish banquet. He held Zhongzhou's hand, happily. He acted as if there were no blood debt between them. The atmosphere was tense, but Cao Cao smiled. Many people praise Cao Cao for being generous. No, do not be mistaken. That was the cruelty of reason. Cao Cao performed an extremely fast calculation of benefits. Executing Zhongzhou would only satisfy personal anger for a moment. That is a very cheap, emotional profit. But sparing and employing Zhongzhou sent a powerful marketing signal to all enemies in the land. The subliminal message was clear. If I can forgive the man who killed my son and give him a title, then you can safely surrender. He objectified the pain of losing his son. This turned personal tragedy into political leverage to attract talent from opposing factions. Zhongzhou was no longer an enemy. He became a living billboard for Cao Cao's policy of clemency. That is the terror of a cold head. All emotions are suppressed to serve the ultimate goal of hegemony. The result of this reckless headhunting strategy was that Cao Cao possessed the most complex team in history. It was a collection of brilliant minds filled with personality defects. Greedy, aggressive, and cunning men all bowed at the feet of a man even more cunning than them. Cao Cao turned himself into the Lord of Monsters. He did not try to tame them into obedient sheep. He let them be wolves. He nurtured their predatory instincts, and he became the fiercest alpha wolf to suppress them all. This management style created terrible efficiency but also harbored enormous risks. When you gather too many smart, ambitious, and unethical people in one place. You are sitting on a powder keg. These people came to Cao Cao for profit and recognition. Therefore, they could also betray him for greater profit. When the initial need for recognition was satisfied, their egos would swell. They began to demand real power, safety, and higher status. At this point, the sweet trap of respecting talent began to reveal its dark side. Manager Cao Cao was forced to move to a new stage. It was fiercer and more sophisticated. No longer using attractive invitations, he shifted to the art of perception manipulation. He had to constantly create illusions. He had to sow fear. He had to bend reality to keep this pack of wolves within the circle. He had to drain their strength until their last breath, without them daring to rebel. Gathering a pack of hungry wolves with good bait is just the first step. The real challenge lies in controlling them to run in the right direction without turning back to bite the master. Money and titles are actually just loose chains. To seize absolute control, Cao Cao elevated the art of management to a more terrifying level. It was the technique of bending reality. In other words, it was the pinnacle of psychological manipulation. In this passé, he no longer used material things to lure them. He began to infiltrate and reprogram the thinking of his subordinates. Two famous stories, the forest of plums and cutting hair to replace the head, are the clearest evidence of this shadow management mindset. Let us start with the story of the forest of plums, also known as quenching thirst by thinking of plums. The context took place during a harsh summer march. The sun burned like fire. Water sources were depleted. The soldiers were exhausted, and morale hit rock bottom. A normal manager at this point would try to find water or promise money to motivate them. But Cao Cao understood that when the body hits its biological limit, money is meaningless. He needed a direct strike on their nervous system. Cao Cao pointed his whip forward and declared loudly, "There is a large plum forest ahead. The fruit is plentiful, sour and sweet, and can quench your thirst." Immediately, when the soldiers heard the word sour, the biological mechanism in their bodies automatically activated. Saliva glands secreted by reflex. The thirst was soothed in an instant, and suddenly, they had the strength to take another step. On the surface, this looks like clever wit. But looking deep into the essence, this is a carefully calculated and cruel deception. Cao Cao hacked into the soldier's survival mechanism. He did not provide the practical solution, which was water. He provided an illusion, which was the plum forest. In management, this is the art of sowing false hope. Leaders paint a bright future scenario, a billion-dollar project, or a huge bonus to squeeze the last drops of energy from employees. The plum forest is not real, but the labor spent getting there is real. Cao Cao turned belief into a type of free fuel to operate his war machine. The terrifying part lies in the ending of the story. When the soldiers used their last strength to reach the destination, they did not see the plum forest. Luckily, they found a real water source. By then, they were too exhausted to complain. Cao Cao's lie was automatically rationalized by their brains as a strategy to save lives. The victims turned to be grateful to the manipulator. That is the pinnacle of the art of control. You make others believe that deception is necessary for their own survival. Cao Cao taught them a lesson that the truth does not matter. Only the result matters. And only by listening to him can they survive. But if the plum forest was the carrot, then the act of cutting hair to replace the head was the stick. It was a perfect punishment theater to establish divine authority. The story happened when Cao Cao issued a strict military order. Anyone whose horse tramples on the people's wheat fields will be executed immediately. This was his way of building the image of a righteous army with iron discipline. But ironically, it was Cao Cao's own horse that got spooked by a flying pheasant and ran into the wheat field, trampling the crops. A major credibility crisis exploded. Tens of thousands of eyes were looking at him. If Cao Cao ignored it, the military order would become a joke. If Cao Cao followed the order to punish himself, his legacy would be destroyed. Cao Cao set up a dramatic stage right at the front line. He drew a sword and placed it against his neck, acting as if he intended to execute himself according to martial law. His advisors, of course, understood the cue and rushed in to stop him fiercely. After a dramatic struggle, Cao Cao offered an unprecedented solution. If manipulating the massas of soldiers in the previous part was just an introductory exercise, then managing the elite class is the true test of a dictator's mettle. In Cao Cao's HR system, Yang Xiu is a classic case study of the tragedy of talent in an organization. He was an excellent employee with superior intellect, but he committed a fatal error. This is a story about the boundaries of power and the price one pays when a subordinate accidentally exposes the leader's insecurities. Yang Xiu was brilliant. No one denied that, but his sharpness was the flashy kind, a blinding light that made others, especially the leader, feel threatened. Let us look back at the times Yang Xiu scored points. When Cao Cao inspected a newly built garden, he said nothing. He just took a brush and wrote the character live on the door. Everyone was confused. Only Yang Xiu laughed and explained that the character for door combined with live inside creates the character wide. The Prime Minister meant the door was too wide. Or another time, when gifted a box of pastries, Cao Cao wrote one box of pastry on the lid. Yang Xiu immediately shared the cakes with everyone. When asked, he replied that the characters also meant one mouthful for each person, so he dared not disobey. On the surface, Cao Cao laughed and praised that quick wit. But deep inside, a psychological crack appeared. Cao Cao had extreme self-esteem. He wanted to be the smartest and most mysterious person in the room. When Yang Xiu decoded those puzzles to easily and publicly, he stripped Cao Cao of the joy of control. Yang Xiu unintentionally sent a message. I can read you. For a paranoid leader, being read by a subordinate is not understanding. It is a potential security threat. A black box of power is only scary when no one knows what is inside. Yang Xiu made that box transparent. The accumulation of those displays led to the final straw at 100. It was a dilemma for the Wei army. Attacking would not bring victory, but retreating would cause a loss of face. While Cao Cao was suffering from a headache, the chef served a bowl of chicken soup. Seeing the chicken ribs in the bowl, Cao Cao blurted out the password for that night. Chicken ribs. The soldiers passed the order in confusion. Only Yang Xiu heard it and silently went back to his tent to pack his bags. When General Shahudan asked, Yang Xiu explained sharply, chicken ribs are tasteless to eat, but wasteful to discard. The Prime Minister issuing this order means he already wants to withdraw but is afraid to say it. I am packing early to leave quickly tomorrow. Yang Xiu was right. His analysis was absolutely correct, but precisely because he was too correct, ayat to the A. Cao Cao used the excuse that Yang Xiu disturbed the army's morale to execute him. But this sentence was actually a purge to reinforce the power structure. Yang Xiu's mistake was violating the supreme rule of power distance. In a dictatorship, decision-making power must belong to only one person. When Yang Xiu spoke Cao Cao's thoughts out loud before the order was issued, he stole the boss's leadership aura. Let us try placing Yang Xiu on the scale with other veteran advisors to see his immaturity clearly. Why did Jia Su, a man no less intelligent, live a long life and remain trusted until the end? Jia Su understood the art of invisibility. He never spoke unless asked. When he spoke he said, just enough, always leaving space for Cao Cao to decide. Jia Su understood that the boss needed an advisor, not a teacher. Or Sima Yi, who saw through Cao Cao even deeper than Yang Xiu. Sima Yi knew Cao Cao's intentions in every gesture, but he chose to play dumb and hide his claws. Yang Xiu used intelligence to seek applause. Like a child showing off a grade A, Sima Yi used intelligence to survive and wait for his time. Like a patient predator, Yang Xiu wanted to prove he was better than the boss. Sima Yi wanted to prove he was useful to the boss. That is the life and death difference between IQ and EQ. Back to Yang Xiu's death, Cao Cao killed him because he had become a security loophole in the system. Cao Cao built power based on unpredictability. Keeping Yang Xiu around, Cao Cao felt naked before his employee. In Cao Cao's mind, if he can guess the intention to retreat, tomorrow he can guess who the heir is or who will be killed. What if he uses that intellect against me? Yang Xiu's death is a grim lesson in emotional intelligence. He thought the boss hired him to be smart. Wrong. The boss hired him to solve the boss's problems, not to prove the boss was less smart than him. Yang Xiu confused being a sharp tool with pointing the sharp edge at the handler. When a tool becomes too sharp enough to cut the user's hand, the natural reflex is to throw it away. Moreover, Cao Cao executed Yang Xiu to warn Sima Yi, a man equally smart and infinitely more dangerous. Yang Xiu's death was a fierce message sent to the entire senior staff. You can be smart, but never act smarter than me. And most importantly, never touch the dark corners of my soul. Yang Xiu died because of his mouth, but actually died because of his arrogance. Cao Cao would never accept any risk outside his control. Killing Yang Xiu. Cao Cao lost a good advisor, but he regained the absolute sense of safety and power. The silence that covered the camp after that death was exactly what Cao Cao wanted. An obedience without questions, without deduction, only orders and execution. But Cao Cao, in his drunkenness of power, did not realize that eliminating sharp critical voices would push him into another trap. When surrounded only by obedient people, or those good at hiding, like Sima Yi, Cao Cao began to step into the loneliest phase of his life. He won the war of controlling employees, but he was losing the war of finding a successor for his spiritual legacy. And precisely from this power vacuum, a real monster, one who knew how to endure and hide 10,000 times better than Yang Xiu, was silently sharpening his claws in the dark. Cao Cao won against Yang Xiu. He won against every enemy, from Yuanshao and Lubu to the opposing factions in the imperial court. But standing at the peak of power, looking down at the empire he spent his whole life fighting for with blood and schemes, Cao Cao faced a final enemy. This enemy was the most dangerous, one that no sword could touch. It was loneliness and the paradox of the successor. This is the final chapter in the Dark Management Manual, where we witness the price of the meritocracy philosophy when it operates to its extreme limit. In his final years, Cao Cao was haunted by chronic headaches. From a psychological perspective, this is a manifestation of prolonged extreme stress, an invisible acid corroding him from the inside. Cao Cao trusted no one, even in his sleep. He told his servants, "I often kill people in my dreams. Do not come near when I am sleeping." That was the most tragic confession of a man who held the world in his hands but could not find a single square meter of safety for his soul. He built an empire based on suspicion, and now that very suspicion was suffocating him. And in the darkness of that loneliness, Sima Yi appeared. If Yang Xiu was the type of intelligent but unwise employee, then Sima Yi was the perfect model of a senior executive in a toxic environment. He was exceptionally talented, extraordinarily patient, and most importantly, he knew how to hide himself. Did Cao Cao see Sima Yi's? Did Cao Cao suspect Sima Yi? Yes. He once told his son Cao Pai that Sima Yi had the wolf glance feature. This means he looked like a wolf, a man who would never accept being a servant, and would eventually interfere in the family's affairs. So the question is, why did a paranoid man like Cao Cao, who was ready to kill Lu Bash by mistake or execute Yang Xiu for a single sentence, not eliminate Sima Yi from the beginning to prevent future trouble? The answer lies in the management trap named the paradox of the successor. Cao Cao needed Sima Yi. The Wei Empire at that time was sandwiched between Zhuge Inshu, and Sun Quan in Wu. The brilliant advisors of the previous generation like Guajia and Zunyu had all passed away. The aging Cao Cao needed a brain strong enough to counter the military geniuses on the other side of the battle line. If he eliminated Sima Yi, who would protect the legacy, Sima Yi made himself an irreplaceable asset. He worked diligently like an ox, enduring every humiliation without a word of complaint. Once, Cao Cao deliberately sent someone to check on him at night. They found Sima Yi, lying still like a log, breathing steadily, despite strange noises, proving a terrifyingly calm state of mind. He hacked into Cao Cao's pragmatic thinking. I am useful, so I am safe. This is the manifestation of the Cobra effect in human resource management. When Cao Cao applied the meritocracy policy, he encouraged ambitious, scheming, and pragmatic people to join the team. He created a harsh natural selection environment where only the most ruthless and cunning could survive. And the winner of that selection race was Sima Yi. Cao Cao spent his whole life training a monster strong enough to rule the world, but he forgot that the monster was also strong enough to swallow his descendants. Sima Yi understood Cao Cao better than anyone. He understood that Cao Cao was a fierce tiger, and the only way to survive next to a tiger was to pretend to be a shrinking turtle. He patiently waited for time to do its job. Cao Cao was mortal. He would age, get sick, and die. Sima Yi just needed to live longer than Cao Cao. It was a battle of endurance and patience. Sima Yi's strategy was the advantage of the latecomer. He let Cao Cao clean up the world, destroy all warlords, and establish the foundation. He just had to wait for Cao Cao to lie down. When weak successors like Cao Pai and Cao Rui took the throne, the turtle would shed its shell to become a wolf. The end of the Cao family was a twist of fate, or rather, the inevitable result of the organizational culture Cao Cao built. Cao Cao stole the Han throne by pressuring the emperor and manipulating the court. He taught the world a lesson. Power does not come from legitimacy. Power comes from strength and schemes. Sima Yi was the most excellent student of that lesson. Later, Sima Yi's grandson, Sima Yan, stole the Wei throne, exactly the way Cao Pai stole the Han throne. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes cruelly. Looking back at Cao Cao's entire life under the lens of dark psychology, what do we say? A genius leader who dared to break all moral barriers to optimize performance. He recruited with benefits, kept people with fear, and purged with cold ruthlessness. He was brilliantly successful in the short term, unifying the North, ending the chaos. But, in the long term, his system collapsed because it lacked the core element: trust. An organization operates